we talk about best practice, but why is best practice really important? It's in the news everywhere. Any of you that read the FT over the weekend would have seen a really big article on there about the R&D scheme, mainly looking at it from a startup perspective, but a lot of the issues that people are seeing with HMRC being very inconsistent with how they are managing compliance. We know that there's a much larger volume of inquiries happening, which in some ways is great because we do want to make sure that the right money is going to the right people. And we know that in the past that HMRC really haven't looked at it, and that's allowed maybe the rules to be misinterpreted a little bit more. So we know they're looking at it. Our issue really is the fact that at the moment it's not consistent, even though HMRC are bringing out regular guidelines and regular interpretation of their codes, which is their rule book. We're not seeing them actually following their own policies and governance.
So the first one's start your claim as soon as possible, and that really goes back to what we were saying earlier, best practices and also the competent professional leading the projects. Now, as part of through the compliance process, but also through general submission of the AIF, HMRC really want the competent professional who's the industry expert with experience, demonstrating to them that the work is qualifying. So starting your claim as soon as possible, whilst that individual still working at the business, still has all the information to hand, is really pivotal to making sure that the claim is as accurate as possible.
As soon as a project starts, or you're even thinking about a project and want to know what the parameters are, the better, all the way through to conversations which lead up to a claim being submitted.
You touched on it earlier, Sam, that HMRC believe that R&D should be really being planned in and should be thought about up front. So you should really be setting out project milestones and really thinking ahead of where the uncertainties within the project will be, and documenting that the time spent and the information and the knowledge that you're gaining from that as you're going along. So collate as much information as you can to support the R&D that you guys are undertaking, but also be prepared with that for when we speak with you, because going back retrospectively to obtain that information is incredibly difficult, especially the longer that you leave the claim. So having that information to hand, we can include as much information as possible as part of an AIF that could really support that there's qualifying activity going on within your business.
So I know this sounds like there's a lot more work. Now, obviously, I was around sort of when R&D was sort of taking off, and I can remember talking to people back then. Some of you may be clients and on the call now, where the main concern about doing R&D was around that they didn't have the information, they didn't have the evidence, they didn't have the time to put it together. Now, 11 or so years later, the old process is now so embedded in that people can turn around claims really, really quickly. So we know that there's going to be some more upfront work for you now. But again, once those processes are bedded into your business and your practice, it's going to make claiming in the future a lot easier and a lot smoother again. So we've got a little bit of a hump at the moment with a little bit of a pain factor. We get those processes in. And I know, Sean, you and your team are there to help. I mean, it's not always about just talking to you at the end of the year anymore, is it?
No, periodically, whether that be quarterly intervals or certain points within your project, that we can just actually have a conversation, collate information there and do it in bite-sized chunks. So it's just not such a big job that needs to be done at an end of year end and then retrospectively go back. So the more interaction we could have, and obviously Richard alluded to that a minute ago, the better. And then it's just a simpler process going forward. The SIC codes, generally, when the company started up, they apply a SIC code, which was an accurate reflection of what that business was doing or your business was doing at that point in time. But time's moved on, the company's gone in different directions and avenues, and now you're doing more than what that code actually says you're doing. And we know that HMRC have used the SIC codes to focus on areas where they believe there's non-compliance. And they're doing that, and they're using that as a filtering mechanism. So I would suggest, and we suggested this previously, but please do review that. You can have up to 4 codes, and just be mindful of, if someone's looking at your business, does those codes tell them of the work that your business is actually undertaking? And we know with the compliance process as well that they're kind of working their way through different areas of those codes just to see and test the water, to see how much compliance or non-compliance there is going on in there. So it's kind of an ever-moving area, but it's something you really need to be mindful of. If it helps to work with us in smaller chunks, setting milestones and agreed dates so we can collate the information, start building up your report that will be submitted, that absolutely works for us as well. As Richard mentions, we don't charge you for dropping us an email or giving us a phone call, that we can talk through and start collating information. So having milestones with us that we can periodically come back to and just piece it together is something that we're absolutely open to, and we've done for a number of companies that we work with. Of having the right people on the call, having a competent professional leading the project is really key, and having the right knowledge and someone who can then guide us and HMRC through the process and that you went through, and then we can document that information is really pivotal. And that goes back to starting the claim as soon as possible, getting that knowledge out of the right people at the right time.